And so females actually need their third set of annotated PowerPoints. Oh man, women, so complicated. Oh my God. So let's take a brief look here at female cycle. All right, so looking at the ovarian cycle, the follicular phase, when the follicle is developing. So menstruation, day one, lasts for 3 to 5 days typically. Women, you know better than I do. So ovulation, usually day 14, somewhere thereabouts, okay? Very difficult to predict the exact date. That's why oftentimes, couples trying to make babies, you take the woman's temperature. It's like, okay, we're going to have sex today, right here. But we're in the mall. I don't care. So it's usually the women who's using that low voice and insisting on it. That's my experience. So anyway, consists of the preantral or menstrual phase and the antral, the pre-ovulatory phase. So once again, notice here how FSH is high during the first part of this cycle. That's because we're preparing the egg for ovulation. And then notice luteinizing hormone stays relatively low and suddenly spikes on ovulation day. So notice the developing follicle. So then it turns into the mature follicle, and then there's ovulation. That's when the egg breaks free, Free Willy, and hopefully gets caught by the fimbriae. The fimbriae on the uterine tube are like a big catcher's mitt. So you hope that there's not a direct connection. The ovulation, the egg is just basically sent out into space, and the fimbriae is a giant catcher's mitt that you hope catches it. Sometimes it doesn't; it misses. You get a passed ball. That's what they call it in baseball. It's not an error, by the way, on the catcher unless someone advances a base because of that. But at any rate, sometimes then the fertilized ovum can implant outside of the uterus. You get the ectopic pregnancy. That's not going to work. So, at any rate, then notice the follicle turns into the corpus luteum, a temporary endocrine organ which secretes hormones. Then it involutes and turns into the corpus albicans. There's a word I couldn't remember at the end of the last PowerPoint, but that does show you the power of knowing root words. Remember, I knew it was alb something, because alb means white. So I knew it was white, and I knew it wasn't albumin. I just couldn't think of how they ended the word. Albicans, all right? Senior moment, all right? Go ahead, make fun of me. You can't hurt my feelings. I don't have any. So at any rate, there's ovarian cycle, all right? There's the first part of it. Then let's kind of zoom in now. Day 1 through 5. That's the preantral phase. Menstruation happens. We have just the primordial and primary follicles. Then day 6 to 14 is the antral phase, where now one dominant follicle advances to maturity, becomes the mature follicle. So several follicles are prepared. You always want to have a backup in case something goes wrong. So one of them makes it there. And the mature follicle secretes estrogen. So remember, estrogen levels are high during days 1 to 14. Remember, I told you to try to remember that, all right? Then we have ovulation and the luteal phase. The root word lute, by the way, means yellow. So the luteal phase is because of the corpus luteum. Again, because the corpus luteum, literally the yellow body. So days 15 to 28, the mature follicle ruptures. That's influenced by luteinizing hormone, all right? That's what basically causes the rupture and ovulation. Corpus luteum forms from the ruptured follicle under the influence of luteinizing hormone. And then it starts secreting progesterone. So remember, I told you to remember, progesterone is the hormone that's high during the second half, days 15 to 28. Estrogen high during days 114. Progesterone high during days 15 to 28. So if you know that, I might ask some questions about just sort of which hormone is in charge during which part of the cycle. I won't ask horribly specific details. I just want you to have a sense of who's in charge at which point, okay? So we are greatly reducing the coverage of this just because, this class only lasts 16 weeks. It's not as though all this stuff isn't important. It's just that in terms of, unless you're going into, obstetrics, gynecology, a lot of you won't need to know a lot of these details. Whereas, endocrine in general, acid-base in general, really apply to everybody. So that's why it's always the reproductive system that gets the short end of the stick here. So we covered just kind of the basics, not lots of horrible details. Remember, I told you your next exam is going to be 3/4 endocrine and acid-base, and only about 1/4 reproductive. So pregnancy and childbirth, gestation, the term for pregnancy, lasts an average of 266 days from the day of conception to childbirth. You'll hear people say 9 months. Well, remember, on average, a month is 30 days. 9 times 30 would be 270. So, if you think of it as 9 months, you're not that far off. 266 is typical human gestation, all right? And the gestational calendar measured from the first day of the woman's last menstrual period, all right? So that's why if you think you're pregnant and you test pregnant, the doctor is going to ask you, when was the first day of your last menstrual period? And so then they are going to predict birth 280 days from that date. And can you see why it's 280 days? Because remember, the 14 days, all right? First day of the woman's last menstrual period, it was 14 days until ovulation. So gestation being 266. If you add 266 plus 14, you get 280. And of course, the baby can come at just about any time, but it's really pretty darn close usually to 280. It's amazing how many women give birth right very near that day, maybe off by a day or two, but it really comes close. Of course, there are always exceptions, but for most women, it really is pretty darn close to 280 days, all right? So, and then notice they divided into trimesters, 0 to 12 weeks, 13 to 28, and then 29 to 40. Okay, 40 weeks, again, 7 days in a week, 40 weeks, 7 times 40, 280. See, it all works out. All right, what typically occurs between days 1 and 5 of the female cycle is that ovulation, the mature follicle ruptures, thickening of the endometrium, menstruation, or gestation. That would be menstruation. And that's it, boys and girls. We're done. Remember, sex education begins at home. And this is one of the most bizarre. This must be in Europe somewhere. When I look at this picture, I can't decide if this was Dad's idea or Mom's idea. If it was Dad's idea and he's having fun and Mom is just like royally pissed off, or if this is Mom's idea and she's royally pissed off because the other ones are making fun of it. But I love the little girl. And look at the little boy. He's going like, oh my God, I can't believe someone's going to pull this picture out when I'm in high school and other kids are going to find it and I'm never going back to school again on that day. So, okay, you guys, that's it. Study hard. Get ready for exam 4 and your final exam.